I am so excited because today I'm recording a bite-sized episode about why you need a margin of safety. And I have just enough time to do the bite-sized episode because I'm about to head to my daughter's dance recital, and then I'm later on headed out to Chicago to hang out at the Two Brain Summit, which I'm excited about. It's my first one, and I'm sure I'll see some of you there, some of y'all there, and it's going to be a great time. But for now, we're talking about the margin of safety. I'm going to do that with sort of two different illustrations. The first is a larger scale, and the second is going to be something more immediate, actually something personal. Very personal and very recent. But let's start with the larger scale idea. And I'm going to do that by sharing about two guys who were the first two modern explorers trying to get to the South Pole. They were racing to see who would get to the South Pole first. And their names were Robert Falcon Scott and Roald Amundsen. Two guys, same mission, very different approaches. Let me explain. Robert Scott decided that he would bring one thermometer on the voyage and got really irritated when his only thermometer broke. Amundsen, on the other hand, he brought 4 thermometers. How about food? Scott brought a ton of food for his 16 men, and Roald Amundsen brought 4 times that amount. Scott decided to put some supplies with one marker on the way back, which meant that if they went off course just a tad, they would miss it. Amundsen, of course, he put 10 different supply stations all over, miles apart, so that if they got off course, they would still find their supplies. Amundsen and his team, they reached the destination, and essentially they didn't have any issues, relatively speaking. Nice and smooth. Unfortunately, Scott and his men died. They didn't make it. And the reason for that is, and this is an actual thing, you can look it up, but the reason for that is that they did not have a margin of safety. What happens if something happens? Well, they didn't plan properly for that. And what happened? They got all types of terrible things, frostbite and pneumonia and all these terrible things that prevented them from achieving their mission and even from staying alive. It's crucial that we have a margin of safety. And I can also relate to this idea just from this past week, or a little bit beyond that. Let's just say, if I'm honest, I have lots of strengths and have some weaknesses like everybody else. And sometimes I can put things off, unfortunately. Not a good thing. We got a new SUV, well, new to us, slightly used a while back, and everything was fine. As time goes on, driving around town, 2 of the tires began to really wear to the point where they needed to be replaced. So much so that a couple weeks ago, a good friend of ours is standing out talking with us and looks at those tires and says, "Man, you might want to replace those pretty soon. They are pretty bald. I don't know how long I would go with those." Sure enough, I totally agreed and planned on replacing them, and then things have a way of coming up. We got 5 kids. I can give you all the excuses, but there was always something that was outranking me going, because it's going to take so much time, right? You sit there for not even, you could drop it off, but just didn't do it. And then just a day ago, I'm off site. I'm working on some speech rehearsal, and I get some frantic calls from my wife. She's driving around with our precious kids, and part of the tire starts like unraveling. I'm like embarrassed to share this, and starts making these weird noises, and she had to get escorted home because of the safety issue. So what do? Came home, and before you know it, we're out getting new tires. So thankfully, and seriously, thankfully, thank God that the only issue was that she had to miss her coffee date with her friend, or her lunch date with her friend, because of the tire issue. It could have been much worse, and it could have been tragic, actually, and all because of not having the margin of safety. In our case, it wasn't financial. We actually have what's called a sinking fund for things like this. So we had the money for the tires. So it wasn't that. It was just that I just literally didn't do the thing that I needed to do, which was get the tires. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's other. But the point is that we need a margin of safety. So many examples of this that sometimes it's life or death. You think of pilots, they need to have a huge margin of safety because if they don't, terrible things could happen in our personal lives. If we don't have a margin of safety, God forbid something like that can become tragic. If we don't have enough money to handle the whammies that are inevitable, whether you have a family or not, but especially with a family, as you move through life and move through the years, these things happen, and you're going to need a margin of safety. It's a night and day difference between how you can handle those things. It goes from being a life-altering situation to a major setback to just a minor annoyance. With the business, same thing. We need a margin of safety with our business. I would say, they're both super important, but with the business, that's the lifeblood. That's the golden goose. You got to make sure you got a margin of safety with the business. And this is why the steps that I teach, call them the path to wealth, the steps to wealth. Two of them include having a margin of safety. The very first one is to have enough to cover something like I talked about, something like tires blowing out, or it's a good example on the personal side, or your highest deductible for your insurance or your auto policy, having enough to cover a scenario like that. And then for the business, that's going to be slightly different because depending on your setup, you might have more expenses. Perhaps it's a little less stable. I always encourage people as a very first step to get to 1 month's of expenses in the bank. God forbid things don't go exactly as planned. You definitely want to have more than that, 2 months and even 3 months of business expenses in the bank. It doesn't mean that you turn off all of your other goals. So step one on the personal side is to have enough to cover your highest deductible. Step one on the business side is get to 1 month of expenses as fast as possible, which means that, you might want to back off on some other things so you can get to that goal. Because what happens is a lot of people, they're playing Russian roulette. Like, they don't do that. And whether it's personal or business, you might be okay for a while, right? Things can work out for a while, but at some point, if you test it too much, something is going to happen. Whether that's something immediate with your business or something on a larger scale that affects the economy, or something is going to happen. There's no better example than COVID. So many, as Warren Buffett said, they were caught skinny dipping when the tide went out. They didn't have enough cash, and they were exposed. And that might be your scenario. You might know that you really don't have enough cash to cover 1 month or more, and this maybe could be your wake up call. Thankfully, in my case, we were fine with the car, but it's just a really powerful reminder to build in that margin of safety, and that's true in every area. But we're talking finances and business. You're going to want to reconcile that step with your other financial goals. If you have high interest debt, you're going to want to get busy working through that, because that also limits your margin of safety. The less you owe others, the less risk you have. So that's one way to increase your margin of safety, is by owing other people less. But in the business, you can make one of two extreme moves that can both limit your progress, or at least limit the speed of progress. So one would be not having enough of a margin of safety, and then you can get into big trouble with that. You can go out of business. Right? Number one rule of business is don't run out of cash. And on the other extreme, you have too much cash. which can also be a problem. It's not as common of a problem, but I do work with people that have too much cash. Too much cash is potentially a problem if there is better use for it. If your money is sitting in a bank and you're making either no or very low interest, but then sitting over here, I'm working with a great client right now who has a ton of cash and has a pretty high interest loan. And we want to make sure, and this is part of what we do, is work through this, is figuring out what makes the most sense in this case. But having so much cash and having this high interest debt, you're paying this tax essentially when you don't need to, especially, is something that we want to look at. And we work through things like if you just don't have enough where you feel safe, that would be your first step on the business. But after that, I was just talking to somebody this morning who has some debt with the IRS. He has some debt with a credit card. He has a pretty decent buffer, about 1 month's worth of expenses. So from there, we don't want to use that, right? Because we need that. We don't want to kill the golden goose. But beyond that, we really want to think through all of the extra cash that we have. Let's figure out a plan to knock this out as fast as possible. So what we might do is take a percentage of that, put it towards the debt, take another percentage of that, put it towards the margin of safety, and you're off and running. And then when you knock it out, you can just build up your cash even more, or depending on where you're at, move to a different direction from there. But the main point that I want you to take away here is the importance of having a margin of safety. My goal is to keep you safe. I care about you. I want to see you doing great things. I want to see you being able to have a business that provides some peace of mind for you and your family. And you're never going to have that if you don't create a margin of safety. So hope that's helpful. If it is, let me know. If it's not helpful, let me know that too. I'm all about the feedback. I may or may not listen to you, but I do want to know what you think. And I want you to let me know if you have any questions, any follow-ups, any other content. I got some great ideas from people already that I'll be working on. But let me know if you have any other thoughts, or if you need any help with this, reach out to me. I got your back, and I'll help you get there. So that's all for today. Thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned for next week. I have a great interview with a super motivational leader that I think is really going to make a big difference for you, and lots of great things coming down the pike. All right, take care. Till next time, you're listening to the Your Fitness Money Coach podcast.